समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
In the field of cricket, particularly in the multilateral format, whenever Pakistan is involved, you can expect a controversy. So one has broken out today, and this is about a player in the Pakistani team, Natalia Parvez, who's a bowler, being described as hailing from Azad Kashmir by a Pakistan origin commentator, Sana Mir, a former cricketer. Now this led to immediate protests and immediate noise among Indian followers of the game, saying that this is a political statement, she should not have said it, what is Azad Kashmir, etc., etc. After which Sana Mir has put out a note on her Twitter handle. You can read this note, it will be on your screens. However, this has also come at a time, she's explaining it by saying this is not political, I'm just explaining where the person comes from. However, this has also come at a time when the region that he's talking about, what the Pakistanis describe as Azad Kashmir or AJK, they call it Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which we in India called as PoK or Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. That's the usage for us, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. The Pakistanis describe it as Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Why do they call it Azad? Because their pretense says that this has not yet decided where to go with India or Pakistan. That will be decided through a referendum or a plebiscite as laid down in the old resolutions of the Security Council. India's belief is that after Shimla Agreement, those Security Council resolutions are not relevant anymore, because in the Shimla Agreement, both sides solemnly agreed that all issues between our countries, including Kashmir, will be decided or negotiated only bilaterally. That's why you can find that our side gets so triggered whenever somebody mentions the M word or mediation, and that's what got India, Prime Minister Modi himself, so upset with Donald Trump when he claimed that he mediated to stop fighting between India and Pakistan. Of course, it hasn't stopped Donald Trump from repeating it, and he will repeat it through his entire term, and maybe even in his memoir, if anybody writes it. Nevertheless, these are very sensitive things, and this particular controversy, Sana Mir has explained it. She said, look, in her point of view, it is just a province in Pakistan. In Indian point of view, this is occupied territory. That is the rude nuance in this case. This has come at a time when trouble has erupted on the street in the Pakistani occupied Kashmir as well. It is not just political. This protest also has been led by a group of NGOs, activists, and non-political formulations. This is called JAAC or Joint Awami Action Committee. Now, they've been coming out and protesting. Trouble started from Monday. There was violence in which at least 12 people have been killed. Now, federal government says 9, local authorities say 10, some sources say 12, but generally it's believed or the agitators claim and politicians in Pak-occupied Kashmir claim that about 15 people have been killed, of which 3 are definitely policemen. So these have been sizable riots. After this, Pakistan has pulled out heavy artillery to put it down. They've used the police and also paramilitary forces which have been sent from the Pakistani mainland. Once again, all this confusion or this mess or this clutter arises because Pakistan still carries on with the pretense that Kashmir has still not made up its mind as to where it wants to be. How hypocritical it is in their case, I will explain to you by doing a little reading of the so-called so-called Azad Jammu and Kashmir constitution as we go ahead. This is the constitution of 1974. I will come to that. However, the current round of protests, besides the usual things, wheat prices are too high, electricity tariffs have gone up too high, etc., also talks about some interesting things. One of which is simply that privileges and perks of top officials and VIPs should be withdrawn. And what are these? What are these privileges and perks? When I started reading up on them, I could only respond or think about them with a wry smile, because these are 2 free cars with unlimited fuel, 2 free cars with drivers, a house, some other expenses, etc. These are perks that I would say in the subcontinent many officials will take as theirs for granted. In this case, the Pakistan occupied Kashmir actually is a small population, and there's a nuance there, because what we call as Gilgit Baltistan is not what Pakistanis put in their formulation of what they call as Azad Jammu and Kashmir. For us in India, Pakistan occupied Kashmir includes this territory, what they call as Azad Jammu and Kashmir, but also the region of Gilgit Baltistan. That's a complexity which I will explain as we go along. This is truly a cluttered thing, but then who said that Kashmir wasn't a cluttered issue? It's cluttered in many layers, in many places, and every hill range, in fact, brings in its own clutter. So I will go through some of that. Now, these protests have taken place, killings have taken place. Then the Pakistani government got really alarmed. But besides the elite privileges issue, there is another thorny point. That is 12 reserved seats in the 53-member assembly there. Now, what are these reserved seats and what are people complaining about? These 12 seats have been reserved for those refugees, quote-unquote refugees, who left the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir, that is Kashmir Valley and the Jammu region, and came into Pakistan as quote-unquote refugees. Now, important thing is they are no longer living in the territory that the Pakistanis call Azad Jammu and Kashmir, or that is part of Kashmir for us, the whole Kashmir for us. They are mostly living in other provinces of Pakistan. However, even if they live in other provinces of Pakistan, they get benefits of being state subjects of Kashmir, and therefore, for them, 12 seats are reserved. Within these 12 seats also, there is a nuance. 6 of these are reserved for those who came from Kashmir Valley on the Indian side. 6 are reserved for those who came from Jammu region. And once again, people in PoK complain that this is heavily weighted towards those coming in from Jammu. Also, this is a patronage network. People who pay bribes, or people who are prominent, or people who are rich, they can buy these seats. And this shifts the balance within their own assembly. This 53-member assembly also has its own complexities of this. Effectively, only 45 are elected members. Only 45 are elected members. Who are the others? 5 are reserved for women. 1 is reserved for the ulema, the clergy. One is reserved for a technocrat, and 1 is reserved for somebody from Jammu and Kashmir who's living overseas, right? So only 45 remain. Of 45 also, 12 were reserved like this. These are pretty much the federal government of Pakistan can decide who to put there. So the agitators now want these 12 seats to go. They also want that these rights to being state subjects should not be hereditary and should not carry on even if you are not living in these districts. Unless you are living in PoK, you cannot continue these rights. The Pakistanis, on the other hand, let these rights continue for at least 2 generations. So it is within these complexities that these protests have broken out. Now talks are going on. The strongest statement on behalf of government of Pakistan came from who else but Mohsin Naqvi of the Asia Cup trophy fame, Pakistan's interior minister as well. He's made a statement that these riots broke out because some people acted on what he says, quote unquote, enemy directions. But Pakistan government is trying to make concessions, meet some local demands. Last time trouble broke out in these districts, there was a long march to Muzaffarabad. That we had featured in our episode 1450, of which we'll share a link with you with the description. Please do check that out. Currently, however, agitators have 38 demands, a 38 point charter of demands. The most challenging of those, I told you, because for the Pakistanis to withdraw these 12 reserve seats is very problematic, because they keep these 12 reserve seats because they think it helps them keep the pretense that the part of Jammu and Kashmir which is currently under Indian administration, that status is also unsettled, and people who came in from there also have seats in the assembly that they elect on their side. That's why they think ideologically and politically it's important for them to keep these 12 reserved seats. But the local people say these people don't belong here, they don't live here, they are much richer, they are part of the patronage network, so why should we provide them space in our politics here? Now, a couple of things we need to understand here. Now, commentator Sana Mir, former cricketer, might have said that Natalia Parvez is from Azad Kashmir, thinking that this is just a province of her country. But that is not what her country says. Pakistan gets caught up in its own contradictions because they say this is not a province of Pakistan. This is a territory of the status of which is yet to be decided, and it will be decided through a plebiscite. However, see the constitution that they have given to their side of Kashmir. For us, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, what they call as Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Once again, I'm repeating it and I'll keep repeating it. In that constitution, check out section 7.2, clause 7.2 or section 7.2, it says it bars any person, section 7.2 or clause 7.2, it bars any person or political party from propagating against and taking part in any activity prejudicial or detrimental to the ideology of the state's accession to Pakistan. So while on the one hand, they say that the status of Jammu and Kashmir will be determined after a plebiscite, within their constitution, they say nobody can talk about accession to India, nobody can talk about any choice other than being a part of Pakistan. In fact, even when public officials, elected officials are sworn in that part of Kashmir, as part of their oath, they have to swear allegiance to the ideology of Pakistan and accession of Kashmir to Pakistan, which means they will never be party to any accession other than to Pakistan. See, in comparison, in India, for such a long time, Hurriyat was allowed to continue functioning as a very powerful entity with multiple parties that always questioned Kashmir's accession to India. In the part of Kashmir still occupied by Pakistan, no such option is provided for constitutionally. It's been taken away constitutionally, and yet at the same time the country says that Kashmir must have a plebiscite, and ultimately the status of Kashmir will be decided by a plebiscite. So that is the big hypocrisy that they are caught in. The second thing is, as I had mentioned to you earlier about Gilgit Baltistan. As far as we in India are concerned, Gilgit Baltistan is very much a part of Kashmir. It's part of our territory. It's a part of our national map. However, what happened with Gilgit Baltistan? That's a slightly different story, because Pakistan does not call that as part of their so-called Azad Jammu and Kashmir. They call these as territories, northern areas, territories in Pakistan. Effectively, they have annexed, or they believe, or they assert that they have annexed these territories. Obviously, India doesn't accept it. This, however, has a more complex history. In October 1947, there was a British Major William Alex Brown, who was commanding the garrison there. A British officer, Major William Alexander Brown, commander of the Gilgit Scouts contingent in Skardu. And he announced unilaterally and on his own that Gilgit Baltistan was becoming a part of Pakistan. This was in October 1947. Then Pakistanis, in their view, tried to formalize it by signing what was called as Karachi Agreement between the leadership of those on their side of Kashmir, on Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and Pakistan government. And this agreement was signed in 1949, the Karachi Agreement, under which under which their so-called government of theirs, of the part of Kashmir controlled by them, of PoK, ceded this territory to Pakistan, and Pakistan thereby annexed Gilgit Baltistan. That is the little complexity I thought I will tell you about. I had also explained it in episode 1450. And Pakistan has struggled to keep this pretense because to convince the world, or at least to keep the cover that they have some autonomy on the part of Kashmir they control, they have to hold elections, they have to have a constitution. I told you what they've done with the constitution. Constitution gives their people no option other than to be a part of Pakistan. However, many of these elections are then fixed. Many of these leaders then last for a very long time. Now, one name we've been most familiar with across generations is Sardar Muhammad Abdul Qayyum Khan. Now, he became president in 1956-57 on the Pakistani side of Kashmir, or on the part of Kashmir occupied by the Pakistanis. They still keep the pretense. They take the pretense to an extreme limit whereby they claim, or they try to show to the world that this is still an independent territory. That's why that territory has a president, and it does not have a chief minister, it has a prime minister. However, you can also see that through history, they've had to fix elections, they have to put their puppets there, and sometimes the same person could have served as president and then as prime minister, so on and so forth. So the one name that we are most familiar with in India is Sardar Muhammad Abdul Qayyum Khan. He became president in 1956-57. Remember, I was born in 1957. It was a long time back. Then 1970 to 75, he was again president. 85 to 91, he was again president. 91 to 96, he became Prime Minister. At this point of time, the President of Pakistan occupied Kashmir is Masood Khan, and the Prime Minister is Chaudhry Anwarul Haq, who happens to be the 15th quote-unquote Prime Minister of Pakistan occupied Kashmir.